Welcome to Press Pause TV. Suzanne Masefield here from the body language company at Think Success. So today I'm really excited to be talking to Hayley Holt from Breakfast TV, and she's going to share some of the things that she's been experiencing and some of the work that her and I have been doing together, and giving you some techniques to help you get ahead, but also to deal with some of the things that are coming up today. And, you know, I'm very grateful for Hayley to come on here and show that level of authenticity and vulnerability. I think that's something that we can all be grateful for when we have people in her position that are prepared to, you know, share some of what's going on in their life that will also help us. How are you, Hayley?
Oh, I'm feeling pretty good today.
Well, I'm really excited that we're sharing this. Hayley and I have been working on some different processes. I'm Hayley's executive coach, and Hayley works for TVNZ. She's the breakfast host there, and at the moment she's in lockdown at home, so she's got a whole different environment to work in. How's that going for you, Hayley?
It's quite strange not being out there and being productive and sort of being part of my team and my family that I've joined at breakfast. So there's a lot of work that we've done together already, which we can share about sort of letting some of that go that needs to be always on and doing something. And I've taken to it quite well, I have to say.
Well, you are being productive because you're growing a baby, so you couldn't be any more productive if you tried. So what we wanted to do today was talk about a process that I've created called a surrender process, particularly at this time because, you know, a lot of fears coming up for people, a lot of anxiety, you know, everybody's experiencing it in different ways. And what are some of the things that you have heard that people have experienced, or for yourself even, Hayley?
Well, I guess I've got quite an insight into being isolated because I have had to be isolated, and for myself, I'm pregnant, so I've got to watch out for my health, for me and baby, but also I'm with my parents who are in that vulnerable group as well.
Yeah.
And so the anxiety around this unseen, unknown virus/enemy was really high at the start of this process. The more we get on and the more we feel safer in our bubble, that is lessened, but it's still there. It's still there when any of us have to go out. And so I have, from our experience, there's a lot of anxiety around the virus and catching it and not knowing where we catch it, and anxiety around food and can we go to the supermarket. And then when you're out, there is a paranoia that sort of pervades everything, and everyone's carrying it. So everyone wants to be generous and kind and compassionate to everybody else, but then they also also stay away because I don't trust you.
Yeah.
So it's a very strange feeling.
It's really interesting. I've noticed the polarity. Sometimes people are always smiling at you as you walk along the street, almost over the top, saying hello and things like that. And other times people won't look you in the face. So it's a real extreme. And I think that probably depends on what day it is for people, what they're going through, you know, and how they're experiencing their home environment in the moment. Because, you know, for some of us, home is a wonderful thing. And for others, it's a very challenging environment.
I know, and I feel very lucky here because I've got a lovely home and a lovely bubble, and I get to go for walks because we've got some land here. But I know that I have got friends who are in apartments and friends who are living with flatmates they don't necessarily know that well, and they don't trust their flatmates' sanitary habits, I suppose you could say. And so it's, I mean, I know that a lot of people are doing it tough, and a lot tougher than that even.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, these times bring out the best and worst in people, I think, really. At the end of the day, it's sort of like, I remember my parents talking about the war. And again, you know, best and worst of people at different times. Sometimes people are fantastic, sometimes they're terrible. Sometimes certain people are always terrible, and sometimes certain people are always good. So, yeah, it's very extreme, I think.
It is. And I've found that I'm usually pretty good in an emergency, but this one's lasted so long that sometimes I get a bit scratchy and I just want everyone to stop talking, leave me alone.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes that's the way I cope.
Yeah, and I think, again, different personality types. Some people like to be around a lot of people all of the time, for them, if they're in a home environment, or some people are actually living on their own. That's very challenging. I've got a few friends that live on their own, and, they're not seeing anybody. They're doing this type of interaction, but it's not that physical contact with human beings. So, yeah, it is a really challenging time. And, we talked about surrendering. That was something I said to you, what is the biggest thing that you've got from this situation? And you said a couple of things. Would you like to share those?
The idea of surrendering that anxiety, I suppose that's what you're talking about, is knowing that fear might be there.
Yeah.
But that keeping it inside is very unhelpful. And that can cause mental issues, physical issues, whatever it is. And so, yeah, I think actually learning to release the fear and not take the responsibility on for it, because I think everybody feels at the moment that they are responsible for the health of themselves, their immediate family, their vulnerable loved ones, and then the country. So,
yeah, which is a really big burden at the end of the day, and you can feel that. And then to release that, sometimes people are overeating or drinking too much or having extremes or whatever. I mean, all of this is normal. And I think the key here is for everybody to suspend judgment of themselves and of other people and bring in that kindness and compassion for yourself first. Because if you're not going to bring that compassion in for yourself, it's very hard to give it to other people.
It is. And also, we aren't 100% responsible, which is something you've taught me for everybody, which is a hard thing for a lot of us to realise. But it's so helpful to release that sort of, like when you hold on to that fear and responsibility, it feels uncomfortable, and to be able to release that is huge.
Yeah, I think it's really important because, obviously if you're a mother, you're going to be responsible for your children. But above that, they always say in the planes, put oxygen mask on mum first, because if you're not managing yourself and not taking that responsibility to look after yourself, really, how are you going to be able to manage someone else? And that requires a bit of time, a bit of breathing space to press pause and just, really connect with yourself at little increments through the day, even if it's just a breath. So, you mentioned about surrendering. So this surrender process that I've created, how have you found that it's helped you?
I'll notice that I am getting this sort of like an anxiety. Sometimes it's general, sometimes it's about something specific, but I will feel it, and it comes up. It feels like a tension, and then I get a bit scratchy and a bit irritable, and I know that there's something that I'm a bit afraid of. And so I'll go and do the surrender process that we're about to share, and I come out of there just feeling light and happy.
Yep.
And even though I know that those fears are real and genuine, that worrying about them is not helping. It just releases it, really.
Yeah.
And as we'll see, it fills it up with good feeling.
That's right. And sometimes people say just put a positive slant on it, but in my years of experience as a counsellor and an executive coach, body mind analyst, I've realized that is not a good way to go. You actually have to, life is full of dark and light, and to go to the light and really have that joy and excitement, you've got to be able to own the challenges and the feelings that you're feeling that aren't good and release them, because otherwise you're too full up. If you put positive on top of negative, it doesn't stick, and you're sort of fooling yourself. We talked about dissociation. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I definitely do. I just wanted to make a wee comment about that whole owning your fears and owning your worries, and actually talking through it with yourself. Is I have, whilst I'm doing this process, my mum was like, why do you want to concentrate on these things you're afraid of or you're worried about,
Really?
Don't think about it, otherwise it'll come out. And it's actually, so I've had to sort of help my family understand that how important it is to own and recognize what you're worried about, otherwise it does stay inside.
Exactly. And I come from England originally. I've been in New Zealand for 26 years now, but the cultures have a similar thing of the English stiff upper lip, don't talk about things, or have a cup of tea and don't talk about anything really very much. And New Zealanders, because of the pioneering spirit and having to push through emotionally for centuries really, that she'll be right, pull yourself together quickly. And that works to some degree, but I think mental and emotional health suffers if there isn't an expression of the actual feeling that you're feeling to release it so that you can then put something else in its place.
Yeah.
That's my experience so far with clients, basically.
Yeah. So we wanted to talk about disassociation, which is a tool I've used for quite a few years now to deal with uncomfortable feelings. And I find myself going to that space. Obviously, I'm worried about the health of my family around me now, but I've also got a worry, because I've got a child growing inside of me, and life is uncertain as it is right now. And so it comes with this uncertainty, and as an older mum, that comes with its own challenges, of course. So I have found myself sometimes disassociating from my baby, and I don't want to do that. So I've had to use some processes to get back in and back into connection. My fear was, and it has been in the past, that if I make too much of a connection with something, that if something goes wrong, it'll be very, very hard to get over. But as you've helped me learn, that it doesn't change the amount of grief.
No, it doesn't. And how have you found it different now you're, because that's an old pattern, and, these patterns at the end of the day are not good, bad, or indifferent. That's how we get through.
Yeah.
And you can still go back to that if you choose to. Anybody that's got patterns that they think, oh, I can't I need to keep hold of that. You can keep hold of that, but add something new until, that sticks and you feel better because of that.
I find that I will see myself doing the disassociation.
Yeah.
And sometimes I want to stay in that place for a while, just whilst I sort of get my head around things or calm down or let things settle. And then I can work on ways to connect back in to the situation or to the person or to whatever it is. And so I'm not trying to not be that person anymore.
Yeah, and that's good.
Yeah.
I think, we need to go with our known before we can move into our unknown, because we have to create safety. And this is what, I want to do with this surrender process, and we've been doing, and I've worked with this with many clients recently, some CEOs that are going through a lot of, all types of things where they're having to firefight with different things. It really works with everybody, particularly.
What I have found, which has been amazing, is that recognizing the disassociation and then working to overcome that, I've become so connected, especially obviously with baby. It's been really lovely. So that's been quite a beautiful outcome.
And that's the wonderful thing about these things. When you actually own the emotion, even if it's a hard one, you are actually connecting with yourself to support yourself more.
Yeah.
It feels uncomfortable to start with, but it's sort of like the first time you go to a gym. You're going to feel a few aches and pains, and it takes a while. It's not going to be an overnight fix. And this is not an overnight fix. This is something, how long have you been doing this? How long have we been doing this where you've started to get results?
Oh, we've been working together for over a year now, haven't we?
Yeah. And this surrender process, I think we've only done 2 or 3 times, but you've already had quite quick results with it, haven't you?
Yeah. I mean, you see a result on the first time you do it. That's an instant thing. Then, of course, you can go back, and it takes a while before you're staying in that place a little bit more.
And that really is your choice, because at the end of the day, we can do this for people and share this, and then It's up to them to take responsibility for themselves, to inject that into their day every day, to process and, you know, fill up on the good things.
Yeah.
Which is great. So if we were going to work on the surrender process today, what would be one thing you might like to work with?
Let's surrender. So I have to break bubble to go and do appointments.
Yeah.
And with that comes fear of infecting myself with the virus and infecting my bubble. So I'd like to let go of that fear.
Okay, lovely. Okay, so when we first started talking about this, some of the things that you were concerned about, and I think this is happening for a lot of people, even if they're not consciously aware of it all the time, is they were worrying all the time. You know, it was seeping into their day. The anxiety was up and down, because the thoughts kept coming in.
Mm.
So the first part of the surrender process is to choose a time in the day that you have as your worry time. You know, and that's actually really important. It's setting a boundary. I think you had the afternoon, you had a specific time, didn't you, that you worked with?
Yeah, my alarm goes off and it reminds me that the time is coming up, and so I'll put myself in a little room, get out my journal and start, which means, as you say, that I don't have to worry beforehand and then I'm released afterwards.
Yeah, and that's about self-discipline. I mean, that takes a little while, but if you know you've got a specific worry time, when those thoughts come up, you can say, oh, I can actually take a breath and I can do that in that half an hour that I'm going to use. I suggest this process only really lasts half an hour. Some people can go for an hour. You could do it in 10 minutes, but it really is about changing things in your dynamic. So
mine go sometimes long. The first one was long because I had all these worries that I hadn't dealt with, and they've become quite short. Sometimes, you know.
Exactly, and it changes, you know, and as you work through them, you have less and less, and then maybe some more come in. So you're just clearing the whole time.
Yeah.
So setting a boundary around your time, choosing a certain time of day to have as your worry or anxiety time. And then number 2 is to get a journal and own it and write down all the fears and worries and anxieties or overwhelms that you're feeling in that moment. Now, the first time you do this, obviously, there may be quite a few, and that's okay. And the more specific you can be, the better. So once you've written those down, you rate them on a level of 1 to 10, which, how high is the anxiety in this? How high is the worry, the fear, the anger, or the overwhelm? So 10 being the highest. So then you've got a barometer to work with. So once you've done that, we looked at looking at the practical. Step 3 is rate it. Step 4 is ground it. So we look at what's the practical in that. So for instance, with the virus, you're talking about getting out of your bubble. What would be the practical ways that you can keep yourself safe? So you talk to yourself about that. So what would be some of the ways?
So if you've got, and if I think through the process before I leave the bubble about what I'm going to do, I ensure that I've got more sanitary products than I need. So I've got gloves if I want them, I've got a mask with me if I need it, and hand sanitizer. And then I think about what I'm going to do when I get to my destination. So where am I going to park, or am I going to get someone to drop me off and wait? And then I remind myself to keep the distance from everybody. And I just think through every step and ensure that at every step I'm keeping myself safe.
Yep.
And that ensures that I'm not actually going to come into contact with the virus. And once you know that, it takes a lot of the anxiety out.
Exactly. So this process is basically, we look at practical, we look at the facts, which is mental, and we look at the emotional. So we cover all areas. You know, some processes just cover emotional or just practical. And really, we need the all-encompassing so that every part of us feels safe and we can work through that. So what are the facts around the virus that help you feel less anxious?
The fact that here in New Zealand, we've had such great leadership that we have it seems like so far, really caught this in time, that our community transmission is so low. I think it's 1 or 2% or something, not even. It's very, very low. So unless you've been overseas or you've had direct contact with somebody who's been overseas or has got the virus, it's very unlikely you're going to get it. So knowing that helps when you're out there. It doesn't mean that you want to be any less careful, because being over careful is good.
Yes.
But if you know that, then it can really decrease some of that anxiety, because the chances that you're going to get it out there in the community randomly is very low.
So this is what you do. Once you've written out your worries, your concerns, maybe pick 2 or 3 a day. I probably wouldn't pick the whole list, but the ones that may be rating the highest, or if they're too high, pick some of the lower ones. Then think about the practical things you can do to overcome those and the facts around it, because that helps stabilize things. Then we look at the emotions. So the emotions around this are, what would they be for you? What sort of emotions would it be? Would it be fear, worry, anger, guilt, grief, sadness?
I think fear and worry is very high.
Yes.
Mainly because it's so unknown. I think a lot of people don't like dealing with uncertainty. And so because we don't know where, we can't see this big boogeyman coming towards us and try and avoid it. So there's just an underlying paranoia. So there's that fear, which is kind of sits quite high in your chest, and then there is a guilt, because you've gone out and you have to, if you think through all the steps you've taken to protect yourself, but at the same time you're trying to protect your whole bubble. So there is a bit of guilt when you come home that you've broken bubble, and if you've caught it, then you're going to give it to everybody there. So there's guilt and fear. They're the big ones.
Right. And guilt is what they call a secondary emotions. Usually underneath it sits fear, anger, or sadness, or all of them. So, and it is something that a lot of women experience, actually. It's sort of almost an inherent thing, which is quite interesting. Female disease, this one. I know men feel it too, but women get a lot of this, unfortunately. Okay, so what we want to do here is have those feelings, and you've mentioned, which I was going to ask you, where do you feel it in your body? So you put one hand on your stomach, feel your feet on the floor, and put the other hand up here. So this area here, when you tap on this area, is the thymus, and it really helps lower stress levels. But you can just put your hand there and that will do it. So I want you to breathe in, Hayley. And I want you to breathe out the fear. Fear of leaving your bubble. The fear of the anxiety around what you might encounter outside of your bubble and how that might affect you. Breathe in and blow out the fear. And again, breathe in and blow out any guilt that you may feel. And I want you to say, I choose to release this fear and anxiety.
I choose to release this fear and anxiety around leaving my bubble.
Breathe in and breathe that out of your body. And focus on the area where you're feeling it in your body. Breathe into the area. You might want to imagine the light, or just breathing fresh air in, feeling safe, and breathe it out. I surrender the fear and anxiety around leaving my bubble.
I surrender the fear and anxiety around leaving my bubble.
Breathe in and breathe out. Now, this you would go through several times. Obviously, we're not going to do the whole thing here. So this is the release process where you own it, you talk, you name it, you breathe in what you want and out what you don't want. And by connecting in with your body, you're connecting in with where that feeling is in your body, and you start to release this. This may take you 5 minutes, it may take you 10 minutes, it may take you just a couple of minutes, but go through at least 3 of those issues. Think about fear. I choose to release fear. I choose to release anger. Do them separately. I choose to release guilt. That's what we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
I choose to release worry. And also, it's really good to, something I would think is really good at this particular time is choose to release feeling trapped. So let's just do one around that.
Okay.
I choose to release feeling trapped.
I choose to release feeling trapped in my bubble.
And that, you know, a lot of people experiencing this because in one way or another we are, you know, we're contained, and that's not our normal way of being. So feeling trapped is part of that equation, whether it's mentally, emotionally, or physically, you know, being contained. So once you release that, and, you know, spend as long as you need to around that, you know, you actually breathe in and breathe out what you don't want. Then we want to look at replenishing and resetting. And we're going to use the breath this time, because often when we're having anxiety or worry, we're shallow breathing. So by breathing right the way down to your stomach, feeling your feet on the floor, on the ground, it feels very safe. And by you putting a hand on your stomach, that's where we often hold on to a lot of emotions. It allows you to really connect with that.
It's my worry alarm.
It's your surrender alarm. I love it. Oh, that's perfect timing. Oh, goodness. Well, at least I know you're doing it. Okay, so now we're going to replenish and reset. So we're clearing out, we're owning the darkness, and we're clearing it out, and then we're replenishing and resetting. So I will name these things and you can say them yourself. Okay. I am safe because.
I am safe because we are following good process, and we've got great, we've got a very safe bubble here. So I am safe because we are following all the advice.
So breathe that in. I want you to feel that going into your body. I am safe because. That's it. And blow out anything that's not that. I am lucky and fortunate because. Breathe that in.
I'm lucky and fortunate because I have lovely people around me in my bubble and without that I can keep in contact with. And I'm lucky because I've got you, Suzanne, to help me through this.
Very welcome. And breathe out anything that no longer serves you. I am grateful because.
I am grateful because we live in such an amazing country that has really dealt with this global pandemic in such an amazing way. And I think we've got some leadership that has saved many lives, many New Zealanders' lives. So yeah. I'm very grateful for that.
Okay, great. I am confident because. Breathe that in.
I'm confident because I trust in our bubble, in our leadership, and fellow New Zealanders.
Breathe that in. And breathe out any thoughts or negative energy that no longer serves you. Just breathe it out.
I just breathed out. I could just feel all of those Kiwis who were breaking bubble for Easter holidays. Naughty.
Yes. Yes, because they put everybody else at risk.
They do.
You know, and themselves.
Yeah.
So I am free because we want to counteract the trapped. I am free because. Breathe that in.
I'm free because I have a free mind, and we've got amazing modern technology that allows us to connect over the internet, and we can connect through energy, and we are free to choose to save ourselves by following these rules.
Exactly. So breathe that in and breathe out any feelings of trapped or anxiety. Just breathe it out. So that's the end of the process, basically. So it's a 6-step process. And the point of it is you take charge to surrender and release, own what's going on for you, rate it, look at the practical, look at the mental, the facts, and then look at actually connecting with the emotion and clearing it before you start putting good stuff on top.
Yeah.
So, okay, where was your rating for the fear and worry at the beginning?
Because I've been doing this process a little bit, I guess it was sort of around 6. I know, and I don't have to leave for a few more days yet, so 5 or 6. But now I just feel very light. She's about a 1 or 2, and actually I feel very confident I could go out right now.
Excellent. Yeah. That's what we want, you know, and that's the key. And when we first started this process, you know, we needed to set a time because there was a lot of worrying going on, and that constant is exhausting. You know, you continually in the fight or flight or adrenaline kick, and that doesn't serve anybody. So choosing a time is really, really important.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, I think this will be very beneficial for people to start using. You know, you found it beneficial, as have many of my clients. But, you know, I really want to thank you, Hayley, for allowing yourself to do this on camera because, you know, obviously you're a celebrity, you're a, you know, a national figure. And for someone like that to put themselves out and be vulnerable, you know, to me is one of the highest gifts that you can give the nation, to be honest.
No, thank you so much. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Vulnerability is about leadership, you know, and the best leaders show their vulnerability whilst maintaining their center.
Exactly.
You know? And you do it beautifully.
It's authentic, right?
Authentic.
None of us is strong 100% of the time.
No. And you know, at the end of the day, it really is about getting that sense of connection with ourselves and with each other and realizing we're all in the same boat, you know, and that's it. And we can work together and have a greater connection. By us doing this, hopefully we will help a lot more people.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah. I mean, if other people realize that, you know, you also experience this just like everybody else, then they may not feel so bad about feeling their own anxiety and use this process to help them.
Lovely. And thank you, Suzanne, for sharing this with people.
You're very welcome. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, just be kind to yourself, you and everybody else who might be watching, of course. Lovely.
Bye-bye.
Bye.